Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I am joined in studio by Stephen Miles, the director of Win Without War. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And, you know, we've been talking a lot about Syria and also the Supreme Court, but generally from the side of that the people need to raise our voices, that our voices need to be heard, that Congress needs to be involved in any authorization of in terms of war and peace. But tell us a little bit about your perspective. I read your statement that you put out. How are you seeing this with at Win Without War?
Well, I think, we can absolutely start where you guys left off, which is that the American public should be having our voices heard in this, and Congress should be coming back from vacation to debate and vote on whether or not we should be involved in this intervention. So that's an absolutely perfect place to start. But we should call this what it is, which is a dangerous and unauthorized escalation of war that Donald Trump is committing in Syria. This is the first time that the United States has directly targeted the Assad regime. There is no sense coming out of the White House that there is any plan for what happens next. There's no clarity on what happens if Assad tomorrow turns around and gasses people again. There's no understanding of if this is a one-time attack or if there are more attacks planned. We're in a really dangerous place. And frankly, when we have a president who's behaved as recklessly and as irrationally as this one is, I think we need to be a little concerned.
Or a little more than a little, right? I mean, like, just never forgetting that this is the president who one of his first acts in office was to send his press secretary out and lie about the size of his teeny tiny inauguration crowd. Like, that's how petty this man is that he officially forced the official statement to be a lie. And now he is recognizing, I think this is to me the most dangerous thing, that he's recognizing now. I mean, he's authorized his military to have much more leeway, and there's been an immense increasing in civilian casualties because of changes in the rules of engagement in Yemen. Right? I mean, so
this is clearly part of a much larger escalation of war that we're seeing from Donald Trump. Not only, as you said, he's unleashed kind of lots of war in Yemen. He's committed more than one airstrike per day of his presidency in Yemen. He recently changed the rules of engagement for Somalia to significantly increase U.S. military involvement in Somalia. We've seen some sort of change in policy in Syria and Iraq that has clearly led to increased civilian casualties and a changing in the way we fight those wars. We've seen ground troops, conventional troops introduced into combat in Syria. We've seen more troops sent to Iraq. And now, again, we're seeing for the first time the U.S. take direct military action against the Assad regime.
But what I think we're also seeing is the media has ignored basically everything else that you said, right? Just giving them a pass on all of that.
Off the radar, for sure.
And, huge civilian casualties from now the media is doing what I think is even maybe more dangerous, which is that I have the TVs in here, just repeat, right? The missile launch. And it's this, I saw this before the Iraq war, the invasion, the media just are like, I said, it's irresistible to them. And that, I think, is the most dangerous aspect. That mixed with Trump, because he is going to like that. He is going to like the fact that instead of talking about the fact that he has a 35% approval rating, et cetera, that he is going to get kind of attaboys and accolades from the corporate media, or at least they're going to cover it with the awesomeness that comes from issues of war and peace. And that, to me, is the most dangerous thing, because he's going to like it and he's going to want more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we had a responsible media with the current folks we're sitting in the room with aside, if we had a responsible media, they wouldn't just be...
That's easy. That's the corporate media.
If the corporate media wasn't just kind of worshiping these images of missiles flying out of the silos and the filmed images of what's been happening on the ground on the receiving end of these missile strikes, they were actually asking questions about what he was doing, what the plan was, what comes next, what exactly is going on in this administration, that on one hand they say it is worth going to war because the president is so moved emotionally by what are unquestionably horrific images of human suffering coming out of Syria. Yet at the same time, committing the United States to a war in Yemen that is leading tens of thousands of children to starvation in one of the worst famines currently happening on the planet. How are these two things happening, and what is the sense of reality going on here? We should have a corporate media that is asking these questions instead of just showing these missiles launching off endlessly on loop.
At the very bare minimum, de minimis, to use, sorry, that's from Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch asterisk. But in a use of that word that I will enjoy instead of his, is the minimum that the corporate media should do is just say, what's the plan?
Exactly.
We have seen what happens when the United States of America gets involved in military action. Syria is right next to Iraq. The destabilization comes entirely from what happened in Iraq, or not entirely, but in large part, the creation of ISIS from that. That was because there was no plan, because it was just this, like, well, let's go with it. Let's do it. You have to be able to say, and then. If you can't say, and then, you have no strategy. So they have to, at the very least, ask, now what?
Yeah.
What happens now?
You know, David Petraeus famously said about the Iraq War, "Tell me how this ends." You know, he's often given a lot of credit for that question. I can't think that there's no one right now who has any explanation for how what the White House did last night ends. I don't know if they've asked themselves this question. I don't know if it occurs to them, but we need to be asking that question. Tell me how this ends. You know, earlier this week, the administration was making headlines because they'd changed years of U.S. official policy seemingly on a whim and suddenly said that Assad could stay president of Syria and that was just fine by them. A couple hours later, almost, they're now bombing his regime, and the Secretary of State's giving a statement saying that he believes Assad has to go and can't possibly be the ruler. There's no plan for how either to make that happen, let alone whether that's the right thing to have happen or not, but how they would make that happen and then what they would do about what happens in Syria after that. This is a recipe for disaster. It is a recipe for chaos. And the entire reason that Congress is supposed to debate and vote on these things before this type of military action takes place is so that we can answer these questions, that we can ask these questions of government officials, that it is not just one man sitting at his beach house down in Florida making decisions that set our country on a path to years and years potentially of war.
One man sitting at his what did you say, beach house? Yeah, beach house, who has a tendency to ignore all the intelligence and information and analysis from the State Department. He basically has tried to just it doesn't exist. Yeah. And literally gets his information from Fox News morning show and has a tendency to just tweet things. I think Nunes just had to step down from his position on the Intelligence Committee because he was trying to clean up a random tweet that this man did. And this impulsive president, now sees, that the media are covering this in the way the recipe is it's all the ingredients for a cataclysmic disaster.
Yeah, and the corporate media does bear some responsibility on this aspect of it too, because he's going to get a lot of press for being a quote unquote decisive leader, for acting. And, there's all sorts of folks out there from the war-loving caucus, the John McCain's, Lindsey Graham's of the world, who are now saying, now Iran knows that America is serious. Now North Korea knows that America is serious. That is not at all what this message is. Their story is the president saw those images, decided to completely change America's policy and take this military action because of that, with no explanation for how, when the exact same types of images were out in 2013, then citizen Donald Trump had no compunction saying that the U.S. shouldn't be involved. Apparently, those images didn't move him at all then. They now say that this is someone who believes firmly that we need to defend international norms and international laws and the prohibition against chemical weapons, when candidate Trump was out there saying that despite the well-established and universal international norm and condemnation of torture, was out there saying we should be bringing back torture. We should be doing worse than the kind of torture that was done under George W. Bush. There's absolutely no clarity coming out of this administration. That is dangerous. And it is truly putting us in a bad situation where America is less safe, the world is less safe, and we should all be a little scared today.
I agree. I agree. And what I think we can take a moment. We can be scared, be worried. We can say prayers or take a moment of mindfulness and whatever it is. But then we need to take action. Then we need to raise our voices. Then we need to demand accountability, because what he did is actually also, I'm not actually a constitutional lawyer, but I believe it's illegal, or at least he did not go through the channels that he needed, right? It's not authorized. And so we can't allow that to just happen, so that all power rests in the White House. This is not the way our democracy works. And so in the last minute here, how can people get involved with your organization? How can people raise their voices and make sure that our voices are heard?
So absolutely. So our website is www.winwithoutwar.org. Folks can go there. They can get involved. There's a host of organizations, Credo, Move On, Peace Action, and others who are out there today with action alerts on this, ways for citizens to get involved, to have their voices heard, because you're exactly right. The Constitution is crystal clear. When we are engaging in this type of military action by choice, and this is a choice, that power rests solely with Congress. And that power rests in Congress so that we, the American public, can have our voices heard and have impact on those decisions. And yes, it's hard. Yes, it's slow. And yes, they may not pass it, but that's the entire point. And the only way we get to do that, the only way we get to weigh in, is if Congress debates and votes on this issue. So folks can get involved at winwithoutwar.org. They can get involved through a variety of other ways. They can simply call their member of Congress, call the White House, make their voice heard. But unless we speak up now, this is going to be something that only gets worse.
Stephen Miles with Win Without War. That's winwithoutwar.org. We have to make our voices heard. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, and we will be right back after this.